When a starving tigress slipped into a raging river, the valley went silent. Her desperate struggle against the current seemed hopeless. What happened just minutes later left everyone on the shore in disbelief. The river was swollen from days of heavy rain. Brown water surged through the valley, carrying broken branches, torn grass, and the scent of wet earth. The air was cool and heavy with mist, and every gust of wind seemed to push the current harder. On the muddy bank, a tigress crouched low, her striped body tense, her ears pressed back. Hunger had driven her close to the water. For days she had hunted without success, and the smell of fish rising from the shallows had pulled her down the slippery slope. She stepped closer, her paws sinking into the saturated ground. The earth trembled under her weight, soft and unstable. A sharp crack split the silence as the bank gave way. In an instant, her body slid forward and disappeared into the river's roar. The impact was violent. Cold water closed over her head. Her powerful muscles thrashed, claws slicing through the current, but the torrent dragged her downstream. She surfaced for a breath, eyes wide with panic, her chest heaving as she fought for air. The sound that left her throat was not the growl of a predator, but a desperate cry swallowed by the rushing water. From across the river, children playing near the hut screamed for help. Adults ran to the shore, drawn by the sight of the struggling tigress. Some froze, terrified to see such a creature so close. Others could not look away, struck by the image of a wild animal trapped in the grip of nature itself. A ranger who had been patrolling nearby rushed forward, rope coiled in his hand. His boots slid across the mud as he shouted for others to help. Two men grabbed long bamboo poles, their eyes darting nervously from the raging water to the stripes flashing beneath the surface. The tigress surfaced again, gasping. Water streamed from her whiskers, her golden eyes clouded with exhaustion. She tried to cling to a floating log, her claws tearing into the soaked bark, but the river wrenched it free. Her body slammed against a half-buried boulder, and the sound of her muffled roar echoed across the valley. "Hold the rope tighter!" one of the men yelled. The ranger leaned forward, scanning the water, timing his movement with the flow of the current. The bamboo poles stretched out over the rushing surface, trembling under the force of the water. The tigress turned her head toward the bank, her gaze locked for a brief moment on the figures reaching out to her. There was no malice in that stare, only raw fear. She lunged, paws striking wildly at the pole. For a second, her claws hooked onto it, pulling it down under her weight. Shouts erupted from the bank. "Pull! Pull! Now!" But before the men could drag her closer, a wave crashed against her flank. The pole slipped from her grasp, and once again the current swallowed her. The river churned, carrying her further away, while broken branches and stones battered her body. Her striped form rolled beneath the surface, then vanished. On the shore, mothers clutched their children, their faces pale. Some turned away, unable to watch. Others raised their phones, recording what seemed like a battle between life and death. The ranger cursed under his breath and slid further down the slope, his hands raw against the rope. He knew he had only seconds left before the current claimed her completely. The water boiled again as the tigress broke the surface. Her mouth gaped open, pulling in air as though it were her last chance. Her body spun helplessly, her tail thrashing like a whip. She was alive, but only barely, and every movement drained the strength from her. The crowd on the bank stood silent, their fear replaced by something heavier, the realization that they were watching an animal, powerful yet helpless, fighting the same desperate struggle any living being would face against the fury of water. The tigress roared once more, the sound ragged, as if torn from deep inside, and then the river pulled her under again. But what happened next to the tigress turned out to be even more unexpected. You will not want to miss this moment. The storm clouds pressed low over the valley, casting a gray shadow across the river. The smell of wet vegetation clung to the air, and the constant roar of the current drowned out every other sound. The temperature had dropped, and each breath carried the sharp chill of rain-soaked wind. Beneath the surface, the tigress fought blindly. Her chest burned, her body twisted in the current as if caught in the grip of a giant hand. At last, she broke through again, her head rising above the foaming water. She inhaled with a desperate rasp, coughing out river water, her whiskers heavy with droplets. Her eyes were wide and unfocused, her movements slower, weaker. She struck at the surface with her paws, more out of instinct than strength. On the bank, the ranger and the men moved in unison. They ran along the shore, keeping pace with the drifting body. One man shouted for another pole. Another coiled the rope tighter around his arm, his boots sinking deep into the mud. They could see the animal's strength fading, and every second carried the weight of finality. The tigress spun in the current and collided with a half-submerged tree. She clung to it for a moment, claws sinking into the soaked wood. Her muscles trembled with exhaustion, and her sides heaved with the effort of holding on. She lowered her head, ears flat against her skull, her throat releasing a guttural sound that was both a growl and a plea. "Now!" the ranger called. The men thrust the bamboo poles toward her, the ends reaching only a few feet short of her position. The water surged again, tearing the log from beneath her claws. She was swept clear of the men's reach, spinning helplessly into a section of rapids. Spray erupted into the air, stinging eyes and skin. The current hammered her body against rocks hidden beneath the surface. She roared in pain, her voice breaking as it echoed against the cliffs. Still she fought, her tail lashed, her back arched as she tried to angle her body toward the bank. But the water pushed her back again and again. The ranger leapt down onto a lower ledge, sliding dangerously close to the water's edge. His hand whipped the rope forward, casting it across the current. It slapped the surface, curling near the tigress. For an instant, she struck at it with her paw, claws scraping across the thick fiber. The crowd on the bank shouted, their voices rising in unison. But the current pulled harder. The rope slipped away, and the tigress sank once more. The surface closed above her, leaving only a whirl of bubbles and broken branches. A heavy silence spread through the onlookers. The river seemed louder than ever, as though it was consuming every trace of hope. The ranger clenched his fists around the rope, mud streaking his arms. He did not move, his eyes locked on the water, waiting for the slightest sign. Then the surface broke. The tigress erupted upward, chest heaving, jaws parted as she dragged in another breath. Her body was battered, her fur plastered flat against her ribs, but her eyes still burned with the raw will to live. She struck out again, paddling with the last reserves of strength left in her. The ranger shouted to the men upstream, "Block the current, get in front of her." They ran, thrusting their poles into the water, trying to redirect debris and slow the flow. Branches splintered against the poles, sending shudders through their arms, but they held fast. The tigress managed to hook her foreleg around the edge of a rock near the bank. Her claws dug deep and her muscles strained against the relentless pull of the water. She lifted her head, dripping, trembling, her breath a loud rasp in the damp air. For the first time, she was within reach. The ranger stepped forward, leaning so far that another man grabbed his belt to hold him steady. He lowered the rope once more, his voice low, steady, aimed not at the crowd but at the animal before him. The tigress turned her head toward the sound. Their eyes met, separated only by the rushing current, locked in a fragile moment of recognition. The scene held like a photograph, river roaring, poles straining, the tigress clawing to hold on, the ranger's rope brushing the surface near her paw. The next movement would decide everything. The climax of her story begins right now. Everything will be decided in the next moments.